He showed up at her doorstep in the middle of a snowstorm, desperate, exhausted, holding a baby who hadn't eaten in hours. She wasn't the kind of woman who opened her door to strangers, but that night, something made her pause. What followed wasn't just a moment of kindness, it was the beginning of something that would change all their lives. If you believe in the quiet power of compassion in second chances, and in the kind of love that doesn't arrive the way we expect, it's time to settle in. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heart-touching stories that warm the soul. Now, take a deep breath and let's begin. Single dad came begging for milk for his child. She held the baby and filled the space called Mom. The wind howled like a wounded animal through the black Oregon night. Snow drove sideways in thick sheets, erasing the edges of the road of trees of certainty itself. Luke Henderson tightened his arms around the bundle of flannel and fleece clutched to his chest. His boots crunched over ice, slipping with every desperate step along the narrow country road. His breath came in ragged bursts, fogging the freezing air, but the sound that tore through him, louder than the storm, was the frail, cracking wail of his daughter. Gracie. She was 11 days old, and she hadn't eaten in 7 hours. Luke's truck had given out 5 miles back engine light, blinking battery dying, and heat gone completely. He had tried everything. He'd begged the night manager at the Ridge Hollow Motel to let them stay the night. The man had glanced at Luke's battered jacket, the baby clutched against his chest, and the cash, only $27, and shook his head. No ID, no card. Sorry, man. Try the church. The church was dark. The clinic was closed. The convenience store clerk wouldn't even look at him when he asked about formula. So now he walked. Past midnight. Past exhaustion. Past the point of shame. The last house on Willow Creek Road still had its porch light on. The others had gone dark hours ago, swallowed by the storm or the holidays. This one stood at the edge of a hill cabin-style tall chimney, smoking with warm light glowing from a single window. Luke's knees buckled as he reached the steps. He shifted Gracie, carefully pressing her to his chest as he raised his fist and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. He was about to turn away when the door creaked open 3 inches and stopped. A sliver of light spilled out onto the snow, and a woman's voice, low and cautious, cut through the cold. We don't open for strangers after midnight. Luke took half a step forward, just enough for her to see him, fully see the bundle in his arms. Please, he said, I don't need anything for me. My daughter, she's hungry. I just need milk, somewhere warm to feed her. That's all. The door opened wider, revealing a woman in her early 40s wrapped in a thick sweater over a worn plaid flannel. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid streaked with gray, her face pale and lined with the weariness of someone who hadn't spoken to another soul in days. She looked at him, then at the baby. Then she looked away. There's a clinic downtown. It's closed. Then call someone. I don't have anyone left to call. A beat of silence passed. A gust of wind slammed into them. Gracie whimpered. The woman took 1 step back. You can come in, but just for tonight, and only until the storm breaks. Luke didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, snow melting off his boots onto the hardwood floor. Warmth hit him like a wave, dry, wood-scented air that nearly made him dizzy. The woman closed the door, quickly locked it, and walked past him toward the kitchen. There's a fire going in the den. You can sit there. He moved toward the glow of the fireplace, settling onto the rug with Gracie still tucked close. She had stopped crying, but her breaths were shallow and uneven. Luke rocked her gently, whispering her name like a prayer. From the kitchen came the sound of cupboards opening. Then silence. Then, you didn't say she was a newborn. I didn't have time. I don't have formula. Luke closed his eyes. Then I'll try warm water. Or oats. I have to try something. She stepped into the doorway holding a ceramic mug. Her eyes fell to the child. She's freezing. I've been holding her the whole time. I didn't let go. She needs body heat. More than that. She walked slowly to him and knelt. Luke looked up startled as she reached out not for him, but for Gracie. "May I?" she asked. He hesitated. "You're a stranger. So are you. But she won't last much longer like this." Their eyes locked for one long second. Then he nodded. She unbuttoned her sweater, revealing a worn thermal shirt beneath. She pressed Gracie gently to her chest and wrapped both of them in a thick blanket. The baby whimpered, then quieted, the tiniest exhale against the woman's skin. Luke sat back against the couch, his hands trembling. "I didn't know what else to do. She wouldn't eat the last bottle. I think the formula went bad. I couldn't even afford the powdered stuff." The woman didn't speak right away. Her eyes were on Gracie. Finally, she said, "She's not the first baby I've seen like this." He looked at her. "Are you a nurse?" A shadow passed over her face. "I used to be something like that." They sat in silence, the crackle of the fire the only sound between them. Then, softly, Luke said, "I'm Luke." The woman nodded. "Nora." "Nora," he repeated. "Thank you. You saved her." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked down at the sleeping child against her chest, the first child she'd held in years, and whispered so quietly, Luke almost missed it. "I wasn't fast enough the last time." And, for the first time since his wife died, Luke saw someone else break. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly enough that he knew the pain had lived there a long time. And now, maybe it had found a place to begin healing. The fire burned low in the stone hearth as the storm raged outside, blanketing Ridge Hollow in silence and snow. Luke sat with his back against the couch, his head tilted, listening to the soft, steady breaths of his daughter. For the first time in hours, she was quiet, safe, warm, and she wasn't in his arms. Nora Winslow sat cross-legged on the floor near the hearth, wrapped in an old wool blanket with Gracie curled against her chest. Her posture was careful, almost rigid, like holding the baby wasn't natural to her, but something she had remembered how to do out of instinct. The soft lines on her face were drawn tight eyes cast downward, not in tenderness but concentration. Or restraint. She hadn't spoken since whispering that haunting confession, "I wasn't fast enough the last time." Luke hadn't dared ask what she meant. Not yet. His voice broke the stillness. "She hasn't slept that soundly since, well, ever." Nora didn't look at him. Babies know when someone is calm. She's not responding to you. She's responding to quiet. There was no malice in her tone, just fact. Still, it stung. "I used to be calmer," Luke murmured, rubbing his knuckles. "Before everything. Everything." He hesitated, but the storm outside had a way of stripping pretense. "Before I lost my wife. She bled out after delivery. Hospital said it was a rare complication. I think it was just delayed care, insurance paperwork." No one said it, but I saw the hesitation in their eyes. Nora's fingers flinched slightly against the baby's back. "What was her name?" "Madeline." Another pause. She would have liked, Gracie Luke added, almost to himself. She was the one who picked the name. Nora finally looked up. Her eyes weren't soft, they were guarded. But there was something there. A crack, maybe. A shadow of something that used to be warmth. "She's not eating, you know," she said. "I know," Luke admitted. "I didn't have enough bottles left. The last one turned sour. I was going to try oats or something." "Oats," Nora repeated, the edge of disbelief in her voice. "She's 11 days old. Her digestive system isn't ready for that." Luke exhaled through his nose, trying not to bristle. "I know I'm screwing this up. Believe me, I'm the first one to say it. But I'm doing the best I can." Something about his voice, frustrated, raw pleading, made Nora blink like she'd come out of a trance. "She's not the first baby I've had to improvise with," she said after a moment. Luke leaned forward slightly. "Were you a doctor?" She didn't answer immediately. Her hands tensed around the baby's back, then relaxed. She adjusted Gracie's position gently, almost automatically. "I was." a pediatric trauma physician, Haiti, Sudan, Nepal, places that don't show up on tourist maps. He whistled under his breath. That's serious work. I used to think it mattered, she said, until it didn't. Luke tilted his head. What happened? Nora stood slowly still, cradling Gracie, and walked toward the hallway. This room is warm. You can sleep here tonight. I'll bring you extra blankets. Don't touch the cabinets. Don't go upstairs. And don't ask about my past again. She disappeared down the hall without waiting for a reply. Luke stared at the fireplace, the orange light flickering across the wooden floor, wondering how someone who moved like a ghost could hold his daughter as if she'd never let go. 20 minutes later, Nora returned with a folded flannel quilt and a small heating pad. Gracie was still in her arms, sound asleep. She passed Luke the blanket without looking at him. She can stay with me tonight, she said. I'll monitor her breathing. If her fever spikes again, I'll know. Luke hesitated. I should be the one she's not safe without constant attention right now, Nora said simply. You need to sleep. If you crash, she loses everything. He couldn't argue with that. His legs ached, his back throbbed, and his eyes burned. He was running on fumes. Still, it took everything in him to nod and hand over full trust to a stranger with no nameplate, no badge, just a fireplace and a quiet kind of command. Okay, he said, finally. Okay. As Nora turned, Luke spoke again. Thank you. I mean that. She didn't stop walking, but her voice reached him low and hoarse. I'm not doing this for you. Luke lay awake for a long time, listening to the fire crackle and the wind screech against the old cabin walls. Somewhere down the hallway, a woman who had sworn to stay detached was holding his baby against her heart. And for the first time in days, he let the exhaustion drag him under. Nora didn't sleep. She stayed seated in the armchair beside her bedroom window, the storm glazing the glass with frost. Gracie's tiny form curled against her. She had monitored vitals in war zones under candlelight and gunfire. She had carried children out of collapsed buildings into makeshift tents, their bodies broken but still alive. And she had failed. Gracie. The name still pierced her like a blade. A little girl with malaria. 4 years old, same name, same eyes. Her mother had screamed for help, but the medicine was late. Customs had held it at the border. Nora had promised to return in 10 minutes. It took 12. She had never forgiven herself. Now, in a quiet Oregon cabin, a child with the same name lay breathing softly against her. Fragile. Alive. Nora brushed her fingers gently along the baby's cheek. You're not her, she whispered, barely audible. But I won't run this time. The wind groaned outside. Inside, something cracked quietly open in her chest. And stayed open. The morning crept in slowly through the frost-laced windows, casting long blue shadows across the cabin's wooden floor. Luke stirred awake, still curled under the flannel quilt on the living room rug. His back ached and his legs were stiff from sleeping on the floor, but it was the silence that startled him most. Silence meant Gracie wasn't crying. He bolted upright. Before panic could take over, he heard a faint hum from down the hallway, soft, tuneless, almost like a lullaby. He followed the sound to find Nora in the kitchen, one arm cradling Gracie, the other pouring hot water into a steel pot. The baby was nestled against her shoulder cheeks, pink with warmth, breath slow and even. She looked safe. Nora didn't glance up. She woke at 4. Took a while to calm her. No fever. Luke exhaled. Thank God. I made oatmeal, she said. For us, not her. He nodded, unsure if he should speak or stay quiet. He hovered near the doorway like a visitor in someone else's life. When she turned around and handed him a steaming bowl, their eyes finally met. I owe you, he said. More than I can ever. You owe me nothing, she cut in. But you'll follow my rules if you're staying through the storm. Luke blinked. Rules. She placed her bowl on the table with quiet finality. This isn't a shelter. You're a guest in my home. He nodded, straightening slightly. Understood. She ticked them off on her fingers. No entering my office. No going upstairs. No touching the books in the hallway. You handle all your daughter's diapers and feeding if you're lucky enough to get her to eat. And you leave the moment the road's clear. No extensions, no discussions. Luke studied her. Her tone was calm, even clinical, but her eyes betrayed her just for a second. Behind the cool precision was something else. Fear, no. Grief, controlled but still breathing. I get it, he said. You're not looking to play house. Nora didn't respond. Instead, she settled into a chair at the corner of the kitchen table and reached for a spoon. Gracie let out a small sigh in her arms and drifted back to sleep. Luke took a bite of the oatmeal. It was bland, thick, but warm. Comforting. He hadn't tasted anything that felt like home in days. They ate in silence for a few minutes until Luke set his spoon down gently. You didn't have to let us in last night. Most people wouldn't have. I'm not most people, she said plainly. I know. She looked up. I mean that, in a good way, Luke added. He saw something flicker in her expression, a pull between wanting to stay walled in and wanting to believe someone could mean that. She leaned back slightly, her eyes on the sleeping infant. She looks like her mother Luke's throat tightened. Yeah. Same mouth, same little wrinkle between the brows when she's fussy. Your wife? Nora hesitated. She didn't survive childbirth. No. He drew a shaky breath. Hemorrhaged. We were at a county hospital, short-staffed. Paperwork delays because our insurance hadn't transferred from my last job. By the time someone finally got to her, he didn't finish. Nora's voice was a whisper. I'm sorry. He looked at her surprised. You don't strike me as someone who says that lightly. I don't. Another silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy. The kind of silence born between people who had both watched someone they loved slip away, helpless to stop it. Eventually, Nora stood and gently handed Gracie back to Luke. She needs to eat again soon. If you have what's left of the formula, I can help you check it. Luke nodded. It's in the truck. I'll go get it. She paused at the door. There's a snow shovel by the porch. Use it. You'll need it to clear a path back up the road anyway. Luke stepped outside into the crisp, stinging air. The snow had piled high along the edges of the driveway, drifted up against the truck's sides like a white cocoon. He brushed it off with numb fingers, fished the small insulated lunch bag from the passenger seat, and trudged back inside, stomping snow off his boots. Nora examined the formula packet carefully. Expired. No good. It might have made her sicker. Luke clenched his jaw. I thought maybe I could stretch it. Just a day or two. She said nothing, but the look she gave him was not judgment, it was weary understanding. I have oats, he offered. Rice, a can of condensed milk. She's 11 days old, Nora said gently. Not 11 months. She needs proper nutrition. And sterilized water. Nothing you have will work. So, what do I do? Nora looked toward the pantry, hesitating. I could try donor milk, she said slowly. I know someone in town, a retired midwife. But roads are shut. No telling how long. Then, what a long pause. Then, quietly, she'll need to latch. If I stimulate enough response, I might be able to produce colostrum. It's rare this late in life, but I've done harder things in worse places. Luke's breath caught. You'd do that for her, I'd do it because I don't want to fail again. It wasn't pity or charity. It was redemption. Luke saw it in the way her eyes never left Gracie's face. You're not failing, he said. Not yet. Later that day, Luke chopped firewood outside while Nora cleaned the bottles he'd brought in from the truck. She moved through her space like someone who used to care about every small detail and was only just remembering why she should care again. Inside that small cabin on Willow Creek, the storm still held the world hostage. But between the smell of fresh wood smoke and the steady rise and fall of a newborn's breath, something thawed. Not the snow, not even the grief. but something older. Hope. The wind had died by evening, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the storm. Luke sat at the edge of the hearth watching Gracie sleep in the small bassinet Nora had pulled from a storage closet. The thing was old, its paint chipped, but it was clean and cushioned and clearly cared for. Luke hadn't asked where it came from. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. Nora sat across from him in the armchair, a book open in her lap but untouched for over an hour. Her fingers rested lightly on the pages, but her eyes hadn't moved. The firelight flickered across her cheekbones, softening the otherwise austere lines of her face. Luke cleared his throat. "You said earlier that she's not the first baby you've had to improvise with." Nora didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, she turned the page without reading it. "I did. I don't mean to pry. I just—" He hesitated, weighing the moment. "I think you've been saving her, not just helping her. I don't know what happened before, but I've seen how you look at her." Nora's voice was quiet. "You should be careful making assumptions about people you barely know." Luke nodded. "Fair, but I don't think I'm wrong." She looked at him for a long moment and for once didn't deflect. "She was 4, she said softly. Her name was also Gracie." Luke's breath caught. "Haiti," she continued. "A village clinic we set up during a dengue outbreak. Her mother carried her in barely conscious. I had adrenaline, IV fluids, a plan, but I didn't have time. Customs had held up our shipment of epinephrine. The courier arrived 13 minutes after she died. Luke didn't speak. He couldn't. I held her while her mother screamed in Creole and cursed me," Nora whispered, her voice cracking. "And she was right. I told her I'd fix it. I told her to wait 10 minutes. It took 12. She stood abruptly and walked to the window, arms folded tight across her chest. The trees beyond the glass were rimmed in ice branches heavy with snow. The whole world looked frozen. I came home and couldn't step inside a hospital again. Not after that. Not after the silence in that woman's eyes. I shut everything down. My license. My practice. My life." Luke rose, slowly approaching her with care. "That's not failure. That's the weight of caring too much." Nora shook her head. "That's the kind of mistake you don't get to outrun." "No," Luke said gently, "but maybe you don't have to outrun it. Maybe you just have to keep walking through it. One choice at a time." She turned to him, then, eyes red but clear. "Why does she trust me?" Her voice trembled. "Your daughter. She falls asleep on me. She clings. She's safe." "Because you are," Luke said, "even if you don't see it." A knock shattered the quiet. Nora flinched. Luke froze. They exchanged a glance before Nora moved cautiously to the door. She looked through the peephole. Her posture stiffened. "Stay here," she said sharply. "Nora, please." She opened the door only a few inches, just enough to reveal a man bundled in snow gear, his breath puffing in the cold. He removed his hat. Gray hair, clean-shaven, mid-60s. "Nora," he said. "It's been a long time." Her voice was cold steel. "Dr. Reinhardt, what do you want? I heard from town dispatch there's a newborn out here, and someone said you'd opened your door. I don't answer to Ridge Hollow gossip." Reinhardt's tone softened. "I'm not here to judge, just to make sure everyone's safe, including you." "I'm fine. You're holding an infant. Without a medical license, I haven't touched a chart or prescribed anything." "You know how delicate this is," he warned. "You step too close to a line and it won't just be you who pays." Nora narrowed her eyes. "Is that a threat?" "No. It's a reminder. One that comes with this." He reached into his coat and held out a white envelope. "It's a petition. From the board. They've reopened your case. On appeal." She didn't take the envelope. He placed it gently on the porch rail instead. "I don't know what happened here," Reinhardt said, "but people are starting to talk. If there's a baby in danger." "She's not in danger," Nora snapped. The man studied her face and something in his softened. "Then show them that." You know how." He stepped back. "And Nora, I never stopped believing in you. But no one can walk alone forever." He turned and disappeared into the snow. Nora closed the door slowly. Luke stepped out of the hallway, having heard everything. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. She shook her head, but not convincingly. "Not yet, but the road's starting to thaw, which means the world is coming back. And when it does, everything changes." Luke glanced toward the bassinet where Gracie now stirred. "Then maybe we don't wait for it. Maybe we choose how it comes back." Nora's fingers curled around the envelope she hadn't opened. "I'll sleep on the couch tonight," Luke offered. If you want the baby in your room." She looked at him. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged. "Because she reaches for you in her sleep. And I think maybe that means something." Nora didn't reply, but she didn't say no either. That night, as she carried Gracie gently down the hall, Luke lay on the couch listening to the creak of floorboards and the soft click of a door closing. She was still afraid, still doubting, but she hadn't locked the door, and maybe that, too, meant something. The scream tore through the cabin like a lightning strike. Nora bolted upright in bed, heart slamming against her ribs. For one disoriented second, she thought it was the past coming back, the Haitian clinic, the sound of grief too raw to forget. But then she heard it again this time, clearer, closer. Gracie. She threw off the quilt and flung the bedroom door open. Luke was hunched over the bassinet in the living room, his body shaking. His voice was hoarse, panicked. She's not breathing right. She's not." Nora crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to her knees beside him. Gracie's face was pale lips, tinted blue. Her tiny chest heaved in uneven spurts. "Give her to me," Nora said, already rolling up her sleeves. Luke's hands trembled as he passed the infant over. She was fine. I put her down like you showed me. I didn't do anything wrong. I swear, Luke," she said, calm but firm. "I need space. Step back." He obeyed, breath ragged. Nora placed Gracie on a folded towel on the rug. Instinct kicked in clean lines, sharp steps. Tilt the head, monitor the chest, check the airway. "She's not fully apneic," Nora muttered. "But it's close." She moved fast. Infant CPR. 2 fingers on the chest, soft, rhythmic compressions. Then she adjusted Gracie's position and gave 2 delicate rescue breaths. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered. "Come on." Luke crouched nearby, fists clenched, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Please," he whispered. "Please, God." Gracie let out a wet, rattling cough. Then another. Then a weak cry. Nora didn't move for a full 5 seconds, watching, listening, confirming. Then she scooped Gracie up and pressed the baby against her chest. The child's breathing stabilized, slow and shallow but steady. Warmth crept back into her cheeks. Luke collapsed into the wall behind him, covering his face. The silence that followed was not peace, it was stunned relief. "She's okay," Nora said softly, eyes still locked on Gracie. It was likely a delayed reaction to that fever she had yesterday, possibly an underdeveloped respiratory reflex. But we got to her in time. Luke looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You saved her." "I responded to a symptom." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You saved her. I didn't know what to do. I froze. I just kept calling her name like it was going to fix something." She turned toward him. "You didn't freeze. You got me." That's what saved her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fire had gone out, leaving only the soft crackle of cooling embers and the sound of Gracie's breath against Nora's collarbone. Luke broke the silence first. "You still remember everything." "I never forgot," she said quietly. "I just stopped trusting myself with it." He nodded slowly. "She trusts you. Even when I didn't. Even when you didn't." Nora exhaled a shaky breath full of the weight of old ghosts. "You can't run from the past. Believe me, I've tried." Luke's voice was rough but clear. "Maybe you don't have to run. Maybe you just need someone to walk through it with you." Nora looked down at Gracie, now asleep again, one tiny hand resting against her neck. Her lips trembled. "I don't know if I can carry it all." "You don't have to," he said, "but maybe you don't have to carry it alone." For the first time since they met, she didn't have a retort. No boundary, no wall, just silence. And then a quiet nod. An hour later, after Nora had settled Gracie back in the warmed bassinet and Luke had built the fire back up, they sat across from each other in the dim glow of the flames. "I used to think I could handle anything," Nora said, staring into the hearth. "I went into medicine because I wanted to matter in the places no one else wanted to go. I thought if I stayed long enough, worked hard enough, I could undo the world's cruelty. But then one life slipped through my hands, and the shame of it." She swallowed. "I didn't think I deserved to try again." Luke nodded slowly. "Madeline, my wife, used to say something that stuck with me. She said, 'Sometimes the bravest thing isn't saving everyone. It's staying soft enough to keep showing up after you couldn't.'" Nora's eyes welled. She turned her face slightly away, but not before he saw it. "Your wife sounds like she was a force." "She was, and gentle. That's what made her dangerous in all the right ways." There was a long pause, warm and weighty. Then Luke asked, "Did you mean what you said earlier, about being able to help Gracie if milk doesn't come from anywhere else?" Nora hesitated. "I've read about induced lactation," she said. "It's rare, difficult, but not impossible, and I might already be responding hormonally. It's something that happens in extreme cases even to non-birth mothers when the bond is strong enough." Luke blinked. "So, she's responding to you. I don't know if it's physiological or emotional, but she reaches for me, yes." Luke looked down at his hands. "She's never had that. Not even from me." "Not really. I've just been trying not to drop her." "You haven't dropped her," Nora said softly. "You found the warmest light in a blizzard and walked toward it." He looked up. "I didn't know it was yours." She gave a small smile. "Neither did I." That night, as the snow began to melt in soft drips from the roof, Nora stayed awake again. But this time, it wasn't guilt that kept her up. It was choice. She sat by the bassinet, one hand resting lightly near Gracie's and a folded envelope beside her, the one from Dr. Reinhardt, unopened still. Her phone buzzed quietly. A message from an old colleague saw your name pop up on the appeal list. "If you're ready, we'll be here." Nora stared at the screen for a moment, then slowly closed it. She wasn't ready yet, but she wasn't running anymore. The snow had begun to melt in earnest. Outside the cabin, the world dripped. Branches sighed under the lessening weight of frost, and the dirt road leading away from Willow Creek glistened like a thawed artery, muddy but passable. The silence of survival had given way to the slow stirrings of something more uncertain life resuming. Inside the house, Luke stood barefoot in the kitchen, whisking eggs in an old ceramic bowl. The baby monitor, a second-hand one Nora dug out from a drawer, crackled faintly behind him on the counter. It wasn't high-tech, but it worked. Every small gurgle from the nursery filled the cabin like a heartbeat. He had never cooked breakfast for anyone but himself and Madeline. And now, here he was, cracking eggs and burning toast for a woman who had saved his daughter's life. A woman who had once vanished into grief and was only now reappearing one choice at a time. The door creaked. Nora stepped into the room, hair damp from a morning shower, sleeves rolled past her elbows. Her face was softer today. Not smiling exactly, but unguarded. The light in her eyes had shifted from constant watchfulness to something Luke couldn't quite name. Not ease, but maybe permission. "You're up early," she said. Gracie was making those little gremlin noises. "I figured I'd let you sleep." Nora raised an eyebrow as she poured coffee. "So you rewarded me with the scent of burned toast." Luke laughed. "Be grateful. I almost made pancakes." She sat at the small wooden table, watching him work. "You know you've been here a week." He turned. "Yeah, I've been counting. I haven't let someone into this house for more than an hour in 4 years, she said. Not even delivery people. Luke leaned against the counter, whisk still in hand. You want me gone? No, she said simply. But I want to be honest about the edges of this thing. This thing, he echoed. Whatever's growing in here, she said, gesturing vaguely around the kitchen, the house, the air between them. It feels like it matters. And that scares me. Luke considered that. You think it scares me less? She looked down at her mug. I think you're used to fear. I think you carry it like people carry keys. He chuckled. Fair. A few moments passed in companionable silence as he plated the scrambled eggs and handed her a fork. I've been thinking Nora said between bites about using the study. Luke tilted his head. For what? Restarting something. Not the clinic, not yet, but maybe offering pediatric CPR classes. First aid for new parents. That kind of thing. Quiet work, human work. He smiled. That sounds incredible. I don't know if I'm ready to touch a hospital again. But if I can help someone keep their baby breathing on a night like ours. You'd be giving people the very thing we needed that night, Luke said. A steady hand in chaos. She nodded. Exactly. Luke stepped away to check on Gracie, who was stirring in the bassinet near the living room window. Sunlight streamed through the glass, dappled and golden. He lifted her gently, cradling her in one arm as he returned. She's warm, he said. Skin looks good. Breathing's even. Nora touched the baby's forehead briefly, her fingers expert but tender. She trusts you now. I think she trusts you more, Luke said. She calms down faster in your arms. She knows I won't run, Nora said quietly. Luke sat beside her, Gracie between them, now swaddled and sleepy. Have you thought more about the appeal? The envelope. It's still on my dresser, she admitted. Unopened. Why? Because I don't know if I'm her anymore, she said. The woman who used to work 15-hour shifts and hold parents' hands as they said goodbye. I'm not sure if that person is still alive. She's not, Luke said gently. But maybe someone better is. Nora looked at him, caught off guard. Better. You're not performing medicine anymore, Nora. You're living it. You're holding one baby. You're not rushing. You're listening. That matters. She swallowed hard. Do you think I could really do it again? Work again. Heal others. Luke placed his hand over hers. You already are. A long silence settled between them. Then Nora leaned slightly toward him, her shoulder brushing his. I was angry, she said, for so long. At the world. At myself. At that child's mother. At the system. At the silence that came after. I know the silence, Luke replied. Madeline was the one who made the world loud and full. When she was gone, I didn't know what to do with the quiet. And now he looked down at Gracie, who yawned and stretched her fingers toward Nora's blouse. Luke smiled. Now it's full again, but softer, like something sacred lives in the quiet. They sat that way for a while. 3 people in one room, no longer lost, no longer surviving, but healing. Outside, a pair of tire tracks appeared on the melting road as a postal truck trundled past, honking, once then continuing on. It was the first sign of the outside world in days. Nora didn't flinch. That afternoon, Luke helped clear the shed behind the house while Nora unpacked dusty books and old medical kits. She wiped them, clean-labeled drawers, and laid out materials in neat rows. Not because she had to, but because the act of readiness was itself a kind of hope. By dusk, a handmade sign hung by the door. Willow Creek Infant Care and CPR Basics. Free. Call ahead. Luke stood beside her, reading it aloud. You sure I'm not who I was, she said. But I'm someone now, and that's enough. He looked at her with quiet admiration. You're not alone anymore, you know. She turned her eyes, softening. Neither are you. As the sun set beyond the snow-lined ridge, the house on Willow Creek glowed not just with warmth, but with purpose. Not the old kind that demands perfection, but the kind that shows up day after day for those who need it. And for the first time in years, the door stayed open not out of obligation, but because healing had found its way home. The knock came just before noon. It wasn't loud, just 3 short raps, but in the stillness of Willow Creek it was enough to stop everything. Luke paused mid-diaper change, glancing toward the front door with an instinctive tightness in his chest. Gracie, now stronger and more vocal, kicked her feet against the changing pad and let out a squeaky protest. From across the room, Nora stood frozen by the wood stove, one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Her eyes didn't move to the door, they moved to Luke. "You expecting someone?" she asked, voice low. He shook his head. "No one even knows we're here." The knock came again, firmer this time. Nora put her mug down slowly. "Stay with her." She moved toward the door with deliberate, calm shoulders set, but Luke saw it. Her left hand trembled as it reached for the lock. When she cracked the door open, sunlight poured in along with a gust of wind and the presence of someone else, someone official. A woman stood on the porch mid-40s in a tailored coat and practical boots. Her badge was visible on her hip and her expression was polite, but professionally detached. "Good afternoon. I'm Tessa Connors with Oregon Child and Family Services." Nora's breath caught. "Is there a problem?" "May I come in?" Luke had already scooped Gracie up and moved to the living room doorway. "What's going on?" Tessa offered a small smile. "We received a report. An anonymous concern about a child residing here without legal guardianship or access to medical care. I'm here to follow up, that's all." Luke's heart pounded. "We're not hiding. We're surviving." "I understand," Tessa said gently. "This isn't a removal visit. It's an assessment." "May I sit down?" Nora opened the door wider without a word. Tessa entered and took a seat near the fireplace, pulling a small notepad from her coat. She spoke with a kind of rehearsed calm, the tone of someone trained to diffuse tension, but also to extract truth. "How long have you been here with the child?" Luke answered. 12 days, and your relation to her, I'm her father, Gracie Henderson." Tessa nodded. "And the mother, passed during childbirth?" "I'm sorry." She made a note, then looked up. "Are you currently employed?" "I was. Lost the job when I had to leave to care for her. But I've applied for reinstatement with Ridge Hollow Fire Services. I have an interview next week." Tessa made another note, then turned to Nora. "And your name, Nora Winslow." Tessa paused, recognition flickering behind her eyes. "Your yes." Nora interrupted, steady but firm. "I'm that Nora Winslow, former physician, suspended license, living off-grid. You've probably read the rest. I'm not here to judge Ms. Winslow, but you should know, your involvement complicates this. I'm not claiming guardianship," Nora said. "I'm helping, feeding, monitoring, supporting." Luke stepped forward. "She saved Gracie's life. Twice. She's not a danger, she's the reason my daughter's still breathing." Tessa looked at the baby who gurgled happily in his arms. Then she turned to Nora again. "You may be under formal review by the state board, but legally you're not certified to provide medical treatment." "I haven't practiced medicine," Nora said, "but I've done what any decent human being would do when a child is in crisis." There was steel in her voice, and something more, dignity not defense. Tessa nodded, writing again. Then she said, "I'm not here to dismantle what's happening here. Honestly, this is one of the most emotionally stable, safe environments I've stepped into in weeks." Luke blinked. "Then, what's the problem?" "The problem," Tessa said gently, "is the law, and how fast things can turn when the right boxes aren't checked." She pulled out a small manila folder and slid it across the table toward Luke. "This is a notice. Temporary guardianship investigation initiated automatically due to the anonymous complaint. You have 14 days to present documentation proving stable housing income and access to certified pediatric care." Luke felt the words land like stones in his gut. "If I don't?" he asked. Tessa looked him straight in the eyes. "Then custody of Gracie will be reviewed by the county." The room went still. Nora stood up. "No." Tessa turned. "Excuse me, you can't take that baby," Nora said. "Not after what she's been through. Not after what he's been through." "Ms. Winslow." "No, listen to me," she said, her voice rising, not hysterical but passionate. "He's a good father, a damn good one. I've watched him learn to feed, bathe, soothe, and protect her. He's exhausted and scared and still shows up, and I've seen what not showing up does." Tessa stood slowly. "I'm not the enemy here." "I know," Nora said, voice lowering again. "But if you remove that child, you won't just be disrupting a household. You'll be breaking something that's finally starting to heal." Tessa took a long breath. Then, surprisingly, she sat back down. "I don't want to remove her," she said, "but I need help convincing the system not to. If either of you has a path to making this legal through employment or medical support or legal guardianship, you need to use it. Now." She looked pointedly at Nora. "Are you willing to sign a limited custodial declaration as emergency medical guardian?" Nora's throat worked. Her voice came softly. "I have to be." Tessa nodded. "Then we may have a path forward." She stood again and handed Nora a separate form. "If you submit this within 72 hours, we can pause the review process. But you'll need backing reference letters, local support, and, ideally, medical reinstatement proceedings." Nora glanced toward the envelope still on her dresser. The appeal. The one she hadn't opened. Luke watched her barely breathing. And then, slowly, deliberately, Nora nodded. "I'll sign it," she said, "and I'll open the envelope tonight." Tessa gave a small warm smile. "Then I'll do what I can to buy you both time." She left quietly, leaving behind only papers and tension. Luke sat on the couch, Gracie in his arms, silent for a long while. Nora stood by the door staring at the now closed world beyond it. "That was close," he murmured. She turned. "It's not over." "No," he said. "But it's not over for us anymore. That's different." Nora crossed the room and sat beside him. She leaned slightly toward his shoulder, just enough for their arms to touch. "Then let's make it count," she whispered. Outside, the last icicle on the porch cracked and fell. Night fell heavy over Willow Creek, wrapping the cabin in a stillness that felt different this time, not born of isolation, but of expectation. The storm was over. The roads were open. The world was moving again. But inside the house, everything felt suspended. Nora sat at her bedroom desk, a single lamp casting a warm circle of light around the unopened envelope from the medical board. It sat in front of her like a verdict, like a dare. On the corner of the desk lay the guardianship declaration form from Tessa Connors, filled out but unsigned. All it needed was a pen stroke. Down the hall, Luke was singing softly to Gracie. She fussed in a new way these days, more willful, more expressive. It made him smile even as he bounced her through the long shadows of the nursery. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming. Nora rested her fingers on the edge of the desk and closed her eyes. She could still hear the last words Tessa had spoken before leaving. "No one's asking you to fix everything. Just don't walk away." She'd walked away from so much. From the clinics, from medicine, from people who believed in her, from the woman she used to be. And now, a baby a father had stumbled through her door and given her something no one else had managed to, a reason to stay. She opened the envelope. Her heart pounded as she scanned the printed letter inside. The board was offering a reinstatement pathway conditional. 6 months of supervision, regular reviews, limited scope of practice, but it was a door, cracked open. It wasn't shame that welled in her eyes, it was relief. Not because they'd forgiven her, but because now she might learn to forgive herself. Luke was pacing the hallway when Nora appeared. She held the envelope in one hand, the guardianship form in the other. Her eyes met his steadier than he'd ever seen them. "I read it," she said, "and they're giving me a chance. If I want it." He nodded, breath held. "And I want it," she added. Luke let out a slow, visible exhale. That's good." Nora hesitated. "But it's not just about going back. It's about staying. Here. For this. For her." She handed him the signed form. Luke stared at her signature at the bottom next to the line labeled Designated Emergency Medical Guardian. His throat tightened. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm not doing this to be noble," she said. "I'm doing it because I've never wanted to protect something more than I want to protect her. And maybe that means protecting you too." His eyes burned. He blinked fast. "I'm not used to people showing up. Not after Maddie. People said nice things. Dropped off lasagna. But no one stayed. I'm not most people," she said. A soft smile formed at the corner of his mouth. "No, you're not." She looked at him, then truly looked and saw it all the weight he carried, the vulnerability and his exhaustion, the way his love for Gracie bled through every word and gesture. "I want to help you build a life here," she said. "Not just survive day to day. A real life. With roots." He stepped closer, voice quieter. "Even if it's messy. Especially if it's messy." They stood like that, a breath apart, as Gracie let out a sleepy coo from the nursery. Luke looked toward the sound, then back at her. "You want to hold her." "I always want to hold her," Nora whispered. Later that night, Nora rocked Gracie gently on the front porch, bundled in layers against the late winter chill. The stars were out sharp and bright above the trees, and the last remnants of ice melted beneath their boots. Luke came out with 2 mugs of tea, handing one to her. "She's almost asleep," Nora murmured. He watched the way Gracie's hand curled against the edge of her coat, the way Nora instinctively leaned into the curve of the baby's weight. It didn't look like someone pretending to be a mother. It looked like someone becoming one. "I used to think my job was to fix everything she said, to be the answer. But maybe all we can do is be someone's constant. The one who stays." Luke nodded. "You already are." They sat on the porch steps, shoulder to shoulder, mugs warm between their palms, while the world slowly remembered how to spin again. Behind them, the light from the cabin spilled golden through the windows, framing the edges of a home neither of them had planned for, but both had begun to claim. Nora turned to him. "You're going to get the job you know." At the firehouse, she nodded. "They need someone like you. And Gracie needs a father who remembers how to keep fighting." He tilted his head. "And what do you need?" She smiled faintly. "To be reminded that redemption isn't earned in one grand gesture. It's in every small deliberate decision to stay when you could have left." Luke was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "I'm staying." "I know." They watched the stars in silence, a family slowly forming beneath a sky vast enough to hold both their pain and their hope. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, hearings, job interviews. The world would push back demand answers, inspect their lives. But tonight there was just this porch, a child. 2 people who had once been broken and now, almost imperceptibly, were beginning to mend. Together. The courthouse in Ridge Hollow wasn't imposing, more of a converted town hall than a seat of law. The old wooden floors creaked beneath every step, and the heat struggled to reach the corners of the room. But to Luke, walking in with Gracie in his arms and Nora just behind him, it felt like the weight of the entire world was pressing on his shoulders. This was the hearing, the one that would decide whether he could keep his daughter. The clerk at the front desk, a woman in her 60s with bifocals and a warm but tired face, directed them toward a modest hearing room. It wasn't grand, a long oak table, a judge's bench, 2 rows of chairs. The walls were lined with faded county maps and a flag that looked like it hadn't been touched since the Clinton administration. Nora smoothed her jacket as they entered. It was the first time Luke had seen her wear anything close to professional attire. Her hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail. Her face was calm, but beneath it he sensed the tension. They were here to fight for something bigger than legality. They were here for family. Gracie fussed softly, and Luke whispered to her, "We've got this baby girl. We've got you." The door opened again, and Tessa Connors stepped in, nodding once to them with a tight smile. She'd become more than a social worker to them. Over the past few days she'd become an advocate, someone who saw past the boxes and forms. Behind her the judge entered. Judge Esther Callahan was in her early 70s, sharp-eyed and slow-moving, with a presence that could hush a room with a glance. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and surveyed them with quiet interest. "We're here today for a temporary custody review concerning Gracie Henderson," she began. "Let's proceed." Tessa rose. "Your Honor, we've reviewed the living situation, interviewed both individuals present, and conducted an on-site evaluation. Mr. Henderson is the biological father. Ms. Winslow has signed a declaration as emergency medical guardian with the intention of petitioning for reinstatement of her medical license. Both have shown consistent care for the child." Judge Callahan raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Winslow. That name rings familiar." Nora stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I lost a patient under my care in Haiti 4 years ago. A child. It triggered a public investigation and eventually the suspension of my license. I chose to step away rather than fight it at the time." The judge folded her hands. "And now you're choosing to step back in." "Yes," Nora said clearly. "Because for the first time since that day, I'm not afraid of showing up again." Callahan looked at her for a long moment. "You were a gifted physician according to your file. Highly commended. I was also a deeply broken one. But this child—" Nora motioned toward Gracie. "She didn't just need me. I needed her. She reminded me that even after failure you can choose to be useful again." Luke swallowed the lump in his throat. There was no embellishment in Nora's voice, only honesty threaded with humility and hope. "And you, Mr. Henderson," the judge asked, "why haven't you sought formal guardianship arrangements earlier?" "I was drowning, Your Honor," Luke replied. "I lost my wife. I lost my job. I lost our apartment. All I had left was our daughter and the will to keep her safe. I didn't come to this court because I was too proud. I came because I finally found someone who helped me believe I could be enough." The judge studied him. "Your Honor," Tessa added gently, "in my 15 years of family services, I've never seen a situation where a broken family rebuilt itself from scratch with this much intention, love, and mutual care. They're doing this the right way." Judge Callahan tapped a pen against her desk, then looked up. "You're asking for what exactly temporary guardianship to remain with Mr. Henderson," Tessa said. "With Ms. Winslow listed as emergency medical custodian with full disclosure to the board. We request re-evaluation in 90 days. The judge leaned back, eyes flicking between Luke and Nora. Then she nodded. "Granted, but with conditions." Luke's heart stopped. Callahan continued. "You'll need documented proof of employment by next review, stable housing for 6 months, and confirmation from the medical board that Ms. Winslow's reinstatement is in process. Any lapse in care, and we revisit this." Luke exhaled. "Yes, Your Honor." "Absolutely," Nora added. "We understand. Thank you." Gracie let out a small hiccup, and the judge smiled faintly. "She seems healthy. Bright-eyed." "She is," Luke said proudly. "She's a fighter." Callahan stood. "Then let's make sure she never has to fight alone again." As they left the room, Luke turned to Nora, stunned but relieved. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "We did it." Outside the courthouse, the light hit them full in the face. Warm, golden, unfiltered. It felt like the season had shifted while they'd been inside. They didn't speak as they reached the car. Luke carefully strapped Gracie into the back seat while Nora leaned against the passenger door, watching him with quiet awe. He straightened, glanced at her, and smiled. "Want to go celebrate?" She arched an eyebrow. In Ridge Hollow. We'll be lucky to find a diner that's still open. He laughed. Then we'll celebrate the only way that counts, by going home. She nodded, her voice soft. Yeah, let's go home. As they drove back through the hills past thawing roads and slowly greening trees, Nora reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small card, the one the board had included in her appeal packet. She stared at the number on it for a long moment. Then she dialed. "Hello," came a voice on the other end. "This is Dr. Nora Winslow," she said, her voice sure and clear. "I'm ready to return." Gracie gurgled in the back seat, and Luke reached over to rest a hand briefly over Nora's. She didn't flinch. She curled her fingers around his. Together they drove on toward the house that had given them all a second chance. The welcome mat outside the house on Willow Creek had been faded for years, its lettering long worn away by Oregon rains and snow. But that morning, Luke stepped out onto the porch and bent down to shake it clean. For the first time, he wasn't just trying to survive in someone else's space, he was preparing it. Inside, Gracie squealed from the living room floor where she lay swaddled and alert, arms flailing with purpose. She had started focusing her gaze more directly these days, eyes darting between faces with recognition than wonder. Her cheeks were fuller, her cry stronger, her presence unmistakable. Nora crouched beside her on a playmat Luke had found second-hand in town. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair pulled into a loose braid clipboard in hand as she organized a tray of pediatric CPR supplies. They had opened the house just a crack. A handwritten flyer posted at the town diner had offered free infant care education every Friday afternoon. No questions, no insurance, just guidance. This Friday would be their first. Luke stepped back in, shaking off the morning chill. "Porch is cleared, roads drying fast," he said, walking toward Nora. "Firehouse called. They want me to start Monday." She looked up and he saw the flicker of something unfamiliar cross her face. Pride. "I knew they'd take you," she said softly. "I don't even own a uniform anymore." "I can sew patches," she offered with a smirk. Luke chuckled, then looked around. "This place looks good. Feels different." "It is different," Nora said. "You made it feel like a home." He gave her a look. We both did. Before she could reply, the front door opened. Tessa Connors stepped inside, shaking a light rain off her coat. "Hope I'm not early." "Right on time," Nora said. Tessa's eyes swept the room, the freshly cleaned floorboards, the small toy bin, the folded pamphlets on safe infant sleep positions. "This is incredible," she said. "You've really turned this around." "We had help," Luke replied, offering her a chair. Tessa took a seat and pulled out her file folder. "Just need to check in officially. Confirm employment status, verify space for child services, and conduct one more informal wellness assessment." "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," Nora said. Gracie let out a gurgling sound and Tessa smiled. She looked strong. Feeding's improved. No more breathing anomalies. Weight's up. No signs of distress. Nora said, the medical rhythm returning to her voice. Tessa looked up impressed. "Are you charting again?" "Just personal records for now," Nora replied. "But I've submitted my board reinstatement paperwork. I'll start supervised hours at the community clinic in 2 weeks." "That's a fast return," Tessa said. "I've had 4 years of silence," Nora replied. "I'm done with silence." Tessa wrote something down, then looked between them. "This house, this child, it's not just safe, it's anchored, and not many families can say that. Even fewer can build it from the ashes." Luke shifted in his seat. "We're not perfect." "Perfect isn't the goal," Tessa said. "Stable, loving, intentional. That's what matters. That's what lasts." She stood, gathering her things. "Consider this my last official visit unless you want me to stop by as a friend." Nora gave a soft, grateful smile. "We'd like that." As Tessa stepped out and closed the door behind her, Nora turned toward Luke. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "I think I am." She studied him. "You don't look relieved. You look quiet." Because it's hitting me, he said. This life, the one I didn't think I deserved after losing Maddie, it's real now. It's not just something we stumbled into. Nora moved closer. It's something we chose, one scared choice at a time. He looked down. Sometimes I still feel like I'm waiting to be disqualified. You aren't, she said firmly. He met her eyes. And you? Do you ever worry you'll fall back into who you used to be? All the time, she admitted. But I remind myself every day that healing doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means refusing to let it define who you are now. She reached down, lifted Gracie gently from the mat, and held her against her chest. The baby curled into her instinctively, no longer tentative, completely, irrevocably trusting. Luke watched the two of them, his throat tight. She loves you, he whispered. I love her, Nora replied. She looked up. And I love what we've built here. Luke stepped forward. There wasn't hesitation in his movements anymore, no uncertainty in his reach. He wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a moment they simply stood there, the three of them, in a home that had once belonged to shadows. You know what I want to do, he murmured into Nora's hair. What I want to carve something into the door. She laughed. What, like initials in a heart? No, he said, grinning. Just 4 words. She pulled back slightly. What words? He gestured toward the front door. Nora stepped over, opened it, and saw the fresh carving in the old wood etched with careful hands. This house chose us. She stared at it, her throat thick. It did, she said softly. And we said yes. The wind rustled through the trees. Gracie murmured against her shoulder, and Luke wrapped an arm around them both. Beyond the door, the world waited with its questions and its noise. But within the walls of Willow Creek, a new kind of quiet had taken root. Not the quiet of retreat, the quiet of peace. Spring arrived quietly in Ridge Hollow. No dramatic fanfare. No sudden bloom. Just the subtle shift of light through the evergreens, the steady retreat of frost from the earth, and the kind of warmth that crept in slowly like healing itself. At the house on Willow Creek, everything had changed, though nothing looked extraordinary from the outside. The cabin was still small, still rustic. The gravel driveway still crunched under the weight of Luke's old truck. But inside, it felt entirely new. Alive. On a Saturday morning, the sun spilled through the front windows in soft, amber streaks. Gracie sat upright now, propped by pillows, a soft rattle in her hands and a determined pout on her face as she tried to bite it. She was 7 weeks old, and her eyes tracked movement with hawk-like intensity. She had a laugh now, brief and sharp and pure, and she saved it for rare moments like when Luke tickled her toes or when Nora sang slightly off-key on purpose. Luke stood in the kitchen flipping pancakes in a skillet that had seen better decades. Behind him, Nora moved with practiced grace, her hands arranging cups and silverware, a small stack of files beside her untouched. Clinic called this morning, she said, placing a mug of coffee near him. They've approved my supervised hours. I start Tuesday. He grinned. I hope they know what they're getting into. They're getting someone who folds baby laundry between patient calls, she replied. It's a package deal now. Luke turned eyes locking with hers. How do you feel? Terrified, she admitted. Then added, hopeful. He leaned against the counter, wiping his hands on a dish towel. We're really doing this. We are, she said. And not just this. All of it. They ate breakfast around the old kitchen table, the same table where Nora had once drawn invisible boundaries between them. Now she reached across it easily, brushing a crumb from Luke's cheek while Gracie babbled beside them in her bouncer seat, completely unaware she'd ever been the center of such a fragile beginning. After the dishes were done and the baby settled into her morning nap, Luke disappeared into the shed and returned carrying a small wooden plaque. Hand-sanded. Hand-carved. Nora raised an eyebrow. More door carvings. This one's for the nursery. She took it gently, her fingers tracing the letters etched into the oak loved long before you knew it. Nora swallowed hard. I wanted Gracie to grow up knowing Luke said that even when it felt like no one was ready for her, she was already chosen, already safe. Nora reached for his hand. You didn't just choose her, Luke. You saved her. And me. He met her eyes. You saved both of us. There was a long pause. Not silence, but fullness. Then Luke cleared his throat. I was thinking, if you're open to it, maybe someday we could make this official. Nora blinked. Official. You know, he said, suddenly bashful, legal, permanent, not just two people living under one roof trying to fix the past, but building something new. Her eyes didn't water so much as soften, like something inside her exhaled. I've never wanted a family, she said, not because I didn't believe in it, but because I didn't think I deserved one. Luke stepped closer. And now, she looked over at Gracie sleeping peacefully under a light knit blanket, a faint smile on her lips. Now I know that family isn't something you earn, it's something you grow into. The same way light finds its way into a cracked room. Luke kissed her softly, fully, as if no part of him doubted anymore. That evening they invited Tessa and a few neighbors over for a simple gathering coffee pie, a second-hand bassinet pushed into the corner of the room. No speeches, no announcements, just warmth. Laughter filled the house for the first time in years. One of the elderly neighbors brought a handmade quilt as a gift. Tessa helped set out paper cups. Gracie, as if sensing the communal joy, stayed awake longer than usual, bright-eyed and cooing. Later, as the guests filtered out and the stars emerged above the trees, Luke stepped out onto the porch with Gracie in his arms. The air smelled of earth and cedar. The wind was soft now, not cruel. He bounced her gently as she blinked up at the sky. Nora joined him a few minutes later, sliding her arm through his. You think she'll remember this? He smiled. No, but she'll feel it. The safety, the stillness, the fact that no one ran. They stood together watching as the trees rustled in the dusk. After a while, Nora whispered, I think we were all waiting to be rescued. Luke looked at her. And we did. She shook her head. No, we didn't get rescued. We rescued each other. Gracie stirred in his arms, her tiny hand curling around his finger. And that's when Luke realized the house hadn't saved them. They had saved the house, filled it, reclaimed it, transformed it into a place that didn't just hold memories but created new ones. A place that whispered, you're safe now. You're home? Somewhere deep in the night, long after Gracie had fallen asleep and the porch lights had dimmed, Luke stepped into the nursery one last time. Nora was already inside, leaning over the crib. He watched her for a moment before saying softly, You're the mother she needed. Nora didn't look at him, but her hand reached behind her and he took it. I didn't give her life, she whispered, but maybe. I gave her the space to grow into it. Luke squeezed her hand. That's what love is, and in the house that once belonged to grief, only love remained. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what part of this story touched your heart the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice makes this space feel like home. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story that brings hope, healing, and a little bit of magic into the everyday. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep believing in the quiet miracles.